Welcome to Returning to Soul, a podcast for lawyers and other high achievers seeking deeper meaning, purpose, and fulfillment in their work and lives. My name is Jessie Brown. I practiced law for 15 years before becoming a career alignment coach and purpose guide for lawyers and other high achievers. I also work as a meditation teacher, breathwork facilitator, sound healer, and forest bathing guide. And I facilitate retreats in Sedona, Arizona. Today, we have a very special guest, Brad Miller, who is the founder of Miller Law and New Modern Lawyer. I'm excited to have Brad on today because we've been engaging in each other's content on LinkedIn and Substack for quite a while now. And he always writes thought-provoking content that really resonates with my own perspective and experiences. And he provides a lot of valuable content that can really help lawyers and others listening to this podcast. So, Brad, I would love if you could share with our audience a bit about you and your firm and New Modern Lawyer.
So I've been practicing law for about 20 years now. I am a true solo lawyer. I focus my practice on working with people that are looking to buy and sell businesses, so small M&A work, and then also people looking to buy it into franchise. So mostly service-based businesses, things like that. Generally not, people looking to buy McDonald's or whatever, but and so that's kind of the law practice. That's my day job, I like to call it. The other thing that I like to do is I like to help lawyers, particularly solo and small firm lawyers, be happier, enjoy their practices, enjoy their life. Because I think that happy lawyers ends up turning into happy clients. And so that's better for everybody. So.
I love that. And, you talk about happy lawyers and happy clients. So you've shared with me previously that even your law practice, your day job, you went through a process of discovering the type of legal work that you actually enjoy and that really aligns with your values. So I'm curious for our audience, if you could share a bit about how that process looked for you.
So I started practicing law. I was a solo. We were out of law school, and basically took whatever came to the door. So anyone who promised to pay me, new client,
Yeah.
awesome. But that also meant that there were people coming with family law issues, wills, someone being sued, traffic issues, all kinds of different things like that. And, again, at first I needed money. I needed something, to clients. And so I kind of took whatever, but I quickly realized that there were some areas of law and some types of clients that just didn't really work for me so great. Things I didn't enjoy doing, people that I didn't like working with as well. One of the first ones I realized early on was family law, divorces, things, the energy behind it, the emotion, the drama behind it didn't work with me. And so I'm like, you know what, that's not something that I really want to do. And so I think I had maybe one client that had some family law issues, and I was like, nope, not taking any more of those. I did wills, kind of same thing, didn't really like the feeling. It was just a very awkward kind of conversations because you're just talking about death, what happens when you're gone, and people don't like to think about that. And so it just kind of was an awkward energy around the conversation that I didn't really enjoy as well. And I did criminal defense for a while. I enjoyed helping people kind of go through the process in the system and, helping through there. I did some civil litigation and things. And I started doing a little bit of work with some small business owners, primarily getting their businesses set up, LLC formations, things like that. And I started, as I kind of get all three of those or a couple of different combinations, started realizing, the litigation side of stuff really kind of wore me down. I remember waking up one morning and God damn it, I got to get up and I've got to go to the court this morning. And to me, that was a sign that was not an area that I should be working in anymore. Like if I was dreading getting up, I was not going to be doing my best work for my clients. So I said, you know what, I'm not going to do litigation anymore. So I got finished up all those cases, stopped even doing the criminal defense work and really focused on the business owners because I enjoyed it was a little more laid back. It was more relaxed. I wasn't having to deal with court schedules and the court saying you need to be here at 8 a.m. at such and such a time. Like, with my clients, I could choose and pick what I wanted to meet, what worked best for me, and kind of work with them a little bit. And it was a happier time. It's happier work. When somebody's getting sued or they're a defendant in a criminal case, it's negative stuff. It's call the lawyer if something bad's happened, and so there's association with lawyer and bad, and I didn't
Mm,
like that. I wanted to be associated with good, with happy things, with positive stuff, and so with my business owners, it was all about building things. It's about getting something new started up, something they're excited to do, and so it's more of a positive feel. When they reached out, and so I did that for a few years until I started picking up a couple instances where some clients wanted to buy or sell business, and I had little experience doing it, but I worked my way through it and got the deals done, and realized I enjoyed that work. I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed being able to help them because there's definitely a need. Most people have
mhm.
never bought or sold a business. If you have owned a business for years, you probably never sold one because you've just always owned it, right? So helping them through that process, guiding them, being there for them through it, and then again, just a positive kind of experience where I could kind of control the flow and things. There's very few really emergencies in the work. And I started doing more of that, and I kind of gravitated more and more towards that to the point where I was like, you know what, I only want to work with these type of clients, this kind of work. And so that's kind of how I came from doing whatever walked in the door and narrowed it down to a relatively narrow niche kind of a practice now.
Wow, I love that. I mean, I'm hearing a couple things from what you just shared, Brad, and thank you for sharing all that with us. I'm hearing that you allowed, your joy, like what brought you joy, perhaps what energized you, and what didn't bring you joy, what drained you, to be a sort of inner compass to guide you in curating your law practice. And I know a lot of lawyers who just kind of feel like stuck, I can't try. And you also had this growth mindset where you didn't know how to represent clients with who are buying and selling businesses, but you learned it. So you opened yourself up to learning new types of legal practice, following what brought you joy and what seemed positive and motivating to you, and you enjoyed helping clients build things. I just think that's huge because I see a lot of lawyers who maybe have been stuck in a type of practice for years and it really drains them. They don't enjoy it and they feel stuck. They feel like I can't try something new. And I had a somewhat similar path to you, even though I started out on the opposite, in big law, sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. But I did multiple practice areas over 15 years. So, started out a lot of class action defense work. And then ended up doing a year of estate planning, some civil litigation, insurance defense. And I represented hospices for a while in government investigations, just like different types of things to try to find what I thought might be a good fit for me. Ultimately, those instances where I did get to help small business owners or do advice and counseling type work, as in mostly I did employment law, so helping them comply with employment laws or build a more engaged workforce, make the workplace better. I did enjoy that, but for me it was like, I don't know, 2% of my work. And then it was to meet those billable hours, it was back to defending large employers in litigation and just doing things that really didn't feel aligned for me. So I'm inspired by what you've created with your law practice. And I think it's inspiring to our listeners. Um, so, you help through your, well, how would you describe what you do through New Modern Lawyer?
So New Modern Lawyer is kind of a brand thing that I've set up. And it's helping solo and small firm lawyers be happy, be happier lawyers. Um, there's so many lawyers out there who are not happy with their practices, and I'm sure that's a lot of people who are listening here. That's their situation. They identify with that. They're like, I go in every morning. I dread Monday mornings. I live for the weekends. Um, and so I want lawyers to be happy, because I think that when you're as a lawyer, when you're unhappy, that's going to impact your work that you do. That's going to impact your the people around you. So if you've got associates, if you've got staff working around you, that negative emotion, the negative energy around that's going to impact them as well, and they're going to feel it. They're going to pick it up. So now maybe they're not going to be as happy because you're kind of I happen in the mornings when my daughter gets up, she's grumpy getting up out of bed. And so I have to really focus on trying to be really happy, because if I don't, her grumpiness will bring me down. So I need to be really happy so that I can try to get her to be happier in the morning. And it's the same thing with when you're working in a law firm and dealing with clients and dealing with people around you, is that if you're grumpy all the time, if you're not having a good time, if you're dreading work and going in every day, that's going to impact those around you, and they're going to feel it. It's going to make them feel negative, lower now. They're going to feel like maybe they don't want to be there. And so they're going to do less. The work is not going to be as good. And so my goal is, my hope is that by making lawyers happier, it's going to impact everyone around them. It's going to impact the clients because they're going to do better work. The clients are going to see they're happier, and the clients are going to end up being happier too at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, everything you're saying is just relates so much with my experience working in law firms. I'm also reminded of how when we're unhappy at work, it impacts, like you just said about your daughter, it impacts our family. And I know for you and me both, family is a really important value for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I can recall, so my husband worked in a large firm for 7, 8 years and then went in house where he's been for 11 years. And toward his last few years in private practice, um, you know, he would come home and it was kind of like a dark cloud entering the house. He was so
Mm-hmm.
stressed out. He was working around the clock. And for a while, we both were at a big firm. But when I was on maternity leave, I was home with our son. And I remember he would come home and it was like, oh my gosh, this dark cloud. He was really stressed out. I mean, he
Yeah.
worked before we left to come to Arizona from DC to go, he must have worked 8 to 10 weekends in a row, like every weekend, nights, and we have a baby, and it was just a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He has very different energy now. I mean, this job that he does is really aligned with his skills and his values. And even my kids they're 11 and 14, and they've reflected back to me like, my energy, my happiness level is quite different than it used to be. It impacts our families too,
Yeah.
and our friends and everybody we interact with, really.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. So, but even to look at it from the law firm perspective, like you shared, I'm reminded of how when there's a partner at a firm, to say like a mid-size or a larger firm, who's not happy, and it trickles down to the associates. And then the associates, rather than doing their work and, being productive and feeling good, they're often going to each other for support or to complain about the partner. So there's a lot of like inefficiency and kind of drama that is created
Mm-hmm.
when, yeah, people at the top are not necessarily happy.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So for any, lawyer who is listening to us and wanting more of what you're talking about, like, I want to be a happier lawyer. I want to have happier clients and, be put out that happy energy around to my family members, my friends, my community. What would you advise them to do, to where to start?
Yeah. So the first part is that you need to get to know yourself better. So that means, and I know this is going to sound sacrilegious to the lawyers listening, but you got to take some time to yourself. And maybe it's go rent a hotel room for a weekend or a cabin in the woods. Maybe it's going, just out into nature for a little bit. Whatever it is, you just need to get away and then sit down with yourself and really understand who you are at a deeper level. What is important to you in life? What are the things that get you going? What are the things that make life worth it for you? One of the things that I always suggest lawyers do in the first things is sit down and figure out what are your values. What are the things that are important to you? We talked about family being an important value for both of us, but um, it could be your health. It could be wealth and abundance could be a value for you. It could be, kind of spirituality could be one. It could be service to others. It could be many different things. Truth, honesty, all these kind of different things can be really important values to you. And I think it's important to sit down and figure out what those are for you. What is it that you think that's really important, that if you didn't have these, like, you would just be lost? And then compared to what's going on in your life right now, are you living to those values? If you say family is your number one value, but if you are never home for dinner, you're always working late at night, you're on the weekends, you're only half there because you're at the office half the time, and what, like, is family really, are you really acting in alignment with that value of family being important? And no judgment, because we've all done that. And there's times where you have to, maybe do one thing so that you can have another. But, look and just see, do you feel that your actions are in alignment with those values, and that the values that you are showing are what you want?
Mm.
Because values can change over time, and we can choose what we want those values to be. If we want our health to be very important to us, for whatever reason, maybe we had a health scare, or a family member run into health issues, and we say, you know what, I want health to be really important. You can choose it to be a value. Then your next step is figuring out, what does that mean? What do I have to do to make that important to me? How do I need to design my law practice, for instance, around that? What do I do in my the rest of my life to do that? Eating healthy, making time during the day to work out, to go to the gym, whatever it might be. And then you got to create the boundaries around it. We know what's important, and don't let other things get in the way of doing that.
That's like that's everything right there. I mean,
Pretty
it's
much.
exactly right. Yeah, that's it. Knowing what's important to you, bringing that, raising our self awareness, looking at our life, how much is my life in alignment with what actually matters to me? How much is it out of alignment?
Hmm.
Perhaps what actions am I going to take if I want to bring it into alignment? And how do we protect those actions? Boundaries, 100%. Yeah. So, and especially if we're changing our patterns, as we come into alignment more, often we are maybe causing some ripples in certain ways, and people have been used to us operating in certain ways that maybe we start changing. So, yeah, having good support as we're learning to set and hold healthy boundaries, I think, can be important.
Yeah, and that's one of
Um,
the toughest things, because you're fighting against habits, so you've got to create new
mhm.
habits to go against the way you were before. But you may find that the people around you aren't supportive of the new direction you're looking to go, because they feel comfortable around the old you, and so now the new changes are making them uncomfortable. And it could be a spouse, even, that they see you going away, and they're like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I don't know if I want to, or okay going along with that. And so I think that's scary for a lot of people too, of seeing, maybe I don't have that support. Maybe my family, though, my friends, I mean, changes, like, friends are cyclical. There's seasons of friends. And so you may lose friends you've had for years, but you're likely to also gain new friends now with a new path. Um,
Yeah, I think that's really important. And what you're sharing resonates so much with my experience. Probably 5 years ago, I began what I consider sort of a path of realignment, of just really waking up to how my life was in some ways, out of alignment with certain values. Um, and out of balance with some. Like, health is an important value of mine, but at the time, health was like a huge focus at the expense of some other things. I was spending way too much time in that area of life. So I just wanted to adjust some things. But when it came to friends at that time, I'm not from this area. I don't, most of my network was in the DC area, and I'm in Phoenix now. And it's been a bit challenging to like develop some community here. And at that time, I was involved in some friend groups where it was a lot of the women would get together for happy hours, and a lot of like gossip or complaining. And I kind of was in, that's a really common dynamic. And I started to realize it didn't feel good anymore. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I don't want to gossip and I don't want to complain. This doesn't feel right. And so I kind of stopped doing that. I also, my desire to drink actually went away on its own. Like, I wasn't trying gradually, but I was like, this doesn't feel good anymore. I don't actually want to do this. And then I, over time, was like, I don't want to do this at all. I want to just go on a walk and with a friend and have a conversation, or have some tea and talk. And that shifted, so I tried to invite some of those women to do those other activities, and some of it didn't really work out. And there was no drama really. It just sort of naturally kind of fell away. And I had a period of believing I don't have any friends. This was probably 4 years ago. I thought, man, all my friends are either they live other places or they're in the form of books or podcast hosts. I'm a huge reader, and I felt community with authors and teachers and podcast hosts and things. But I was in real life, I didn't really have anyone I felt a deep connection with. I mean, I have a supportive husband, but as far as my friends were concerned, and it took a lot of intentionality, like putting myself out there authentically in conversations when I met people through my kids' sports or whatever, on social media, and also going places. Like I found a yoga studio that's more, they offer a lot of meditation classes, sound baths, things I'm interested in. I started a book club. I started some things to try to create community. And now I do have some great aligned friends, but it took time. It took intention. And some of those older friendships we're still friends, but some of them could last through my changes, but some of them it didn't really last. And it wasn't drama. It just was not a fit anymore.
Yep. No, I mean the three people, the three grooms I had at my wedding, two of them I've not talked to in over probably 15 years. Because, like you said, and it wasn't anything that was big. It wasn't, it just drifted apart because of kind of where we were going in life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think
Right.
that friends are meant to be, again, through the seasons of life. There's some people who are going to be close in different areas, different times, periods throughout your life. And those people were great for through in college. But then, as I went into a different area of life, they did as well. And so I'm sure they've got friends now, in whatever season they're in, and I've got different people in mind. So I think that's just the way that naturally it goes.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Um, so another thing, Brad, that I think we have in common is I've seen you use this hashtag lawyers who woo. And I don't know that I've used that hashtag, but I'm here for it. It definitely resonates with who I think I am. And a lot of the, clients who come to me who are lawyers, most of them are, not all, but I'd say at least half of them are open to spirituality. I often incorporate meditation or other things like that with my coaching clients. So I'm curious what lawyers who woo means to you.
Really, to me, at the base, it means getting to know yourself better. It means being willing to be authentic, um, regardless of the situation. Um, the legal profession has this stereotype, this look, this kind of expectation of what a lawyer looks like or should be, and it's the wearing the suits and being very formal and speaking in words that most people don't understand in Latin, and and having an office with the wood paneling and all this other stuff, and that's great if that is who you are as a person. But I know there's so many people who put on what I call the lawyer mask. Monday morning they put on this mask and they have to play a part of someone Monday through Friday, and then the weekend comes and they take the mask off and they feel they can kind of let their hair down, so to speak, sometimes literally people. And they can be kind of who they are. And then again, they come back to Monday again, they put that mask back on. And so for me, the idea of kind of spirituality, a lot of it has to do with being okay with who you are, not caring what this expectation is that lawyers have to look a certain way, realizing there are clients out there who are going to be attracted to you for who you are as a person, and that you should not have to put on a mask or put on some sort of an act of somebody else to have clients, to be successful. Lean into it. In fact, I think that too often all lawyers kind of tend to look the same. We dress all kind of the same. Our firms all look the same. Our websites look the same. The way we market, all this kind of stuff, it all looks kind of the same. And I think a really great way to distinguish yourself and to attract the kind of clients that were going to resonate best with you is to be who you are. If that means that you are a guy and you want to wear long hair, awesome. If that means you have tattoos, great. If that means that you want to have meditation sessions with your clients, or you want to, do tarot readings with them before you start, whatever it might be, go ahead, do that, because that's who you are. That's who you authentically are as a person. And you will attract those around you who are going to feel that same way.
I love that so much. It again, everything you share is just deeply resonates with my experience. I remember that lawyer mask very well when I kind of retired from practicing law about a year and a half ago. Um, I had so many suits that I gave away because I may wear a suit in the future, but they sort of represented to me. I hated all of the clothes. I was just like, if I wear, I have other suits I like and other formal clothes if I need to wear something more formal for some reason. But yeah, I went from taking all of those clothes from my main closet into a guest room closet. And then eventually I was like, what am I doing? I never want to go back to this. And doesn't mean I would never practice law again. I just never want to wear that mask, that like uniform, that really, there's nothing wrong with suits, but the stuff I was wearing, what wasn't me. It really didn't feel like me at all. So I appreciate that. And I talk with lawyers who tell me they feel exactly what you said. They're light, they're happy on the weekend, and then they're crying in their car on the way to work on Monday morning, or they're dreading, getting up, and then they feel depressed during the week. And it's, for any lawyer who's feeling that way, I mean, what would you share as maybe like a small practice just to be able to, if they want to continue practicing law, to continue, but let go of that mask a little bit, bring some of that authenticity, like their true self, that weekend self into the week.
Mm-hmm. I think some of it's going to depend on your situation. I think if you are maybe a senior lawyer, if you are a solo, if you own your own practice or whatever, I think you're going to have a lot more flexibility in this aspect as opposed to if you were a young associate in a firm who, if you start coming to work wearing with tattoos all over and all this kind of stuff, that may impact your job there, which might not be a bad thing, mind you. That may be what needs to
Yeah.
happen. Like that,
Yeah.
maybe that's not the best fit for you anyway. And so this is just one way to finally sever that tie. And that's, um, but it's figuring out, what is it that makes you happy? What makes you feel comfortable? Who really are you on that weekend? And bringing in aspects of that into your practice, bring that into your office, start something, some small stuff, maybe some pictures or something like that might remind you, that have spiritual significance to you, let's say. I know, so you've got a salt lamp behind you. Have a salt lamp in your office, for instance. Most people are not really, they're just gonna say, oh, it's a nice little lamp, it's kind of fun, and for the most part that's gonna slip under people's radars, but you can know, hey, why have this here? You've got, you got plants, things that make you comfortable. Design your environment in ways that make you comfortable. I think that's maybe the first way to do it is just, if you're comfortable in your work and in the place you are, that's going to impact how you feel and how the work that you do. If it's very stark, very, white, everything hard surfaces, that's, to me, that puts me on edge. If everything is very cold and things like that, so it's nice to have some soft, some fabrics, some colors, some, plants and things like that in your space. And so just kind of start with some little stuff, if maybe that's all you can do. But just don't be afraid of being, of letting yourself be seen by others. I think clients, even if you're in the big firms, because even when you're dealing with corporate clients, you're still dealing with individuals on the other end. Your client, the person who signs your checks, your contact, they're a person. They have likes and they have interests and things like that as well. Um, you know, be yourself with them. Wear a crazy colored socks. I mean, start with little stuff, build up that comfort before you start going all crazy, in the outfits or whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's on you as a person, as an individual, to create the world around you that you feel fits best with you. And if that means that you need to be in an environment where there's no one looking at you, they don't care what you're wearing, that you can wear, t-shirt or whatever, while you're sitting there, then, figure out a way to make that happen, whether that's working on your own, whether that's finding something else. Maybe it's doing consulting work for lawyers, where they have you do drafting for them or do research for them, or, who knows what it might be. But there's always a way, if you have the desire to do so, to find an ability to be yourself, to be authentic, to let yourself be comfortable and feel some freedom in being who you are. Um, but
Yeah.
again, I know it's as lawyers, there's a lot of fear because we don't want to be ostracized. But the other is the more that of us that do it, the more other people will be willing to do it as well. So if they say, hey, if he did it, I can do it too. If she's done it that way and it's been okay, well, maybe I can do something similar. Like, feel more comfortable too. So that's the other thing, is being an example. When you start to feel that, be an example for others around you.
I love that. Yes. Um, yeah, it's really inspiring what you're sharing. And, I am curious about, I can't help but think that starting your own firm or being a solo practitioner could be a great option for a lot of the lawyers I talk to who don't want to leave practicing law. There's aspects of the practice that they like and that, aligns with their financial needs, family responsibilities, whatever. Uh, but how challenging is it, like, to set up your own firm, your own practice? It's not as common with a lot of the people I talk with, but I think it could be a really great option.
So I started my practice 20 years ago at law school. So things are definitely different today than they were back then. There were a lot less resources back then, and the resources there were not in one area. So you had to really search to find things. There's a lot more out there now. There's a lot more resources. There's just a lot more services for people who solo. Software, all these other things that you can do that makes it a lot easier. I mean, heck, with AI anymore, it's a lot easier to do 17 different tasks by yourself. You don't need to have all these other people doing things for you. Uh, and so I think it's a lot easier now than ever before to go on your own if that's something that you feel is aligned or that you feel called to do. I would say the very first thing you need to do, though, is, again, sit back and decide what it is exactly that you want in life. Because if you are looking for, if money and that kind of the wealth, if that's very important to you, you're going to be designing it as a lot different of a practice than if what's really important is to be able to be available at 3 p.m. every day for your kids. Right? I mean, if you've got young kids and you're like, I need to make sure that I'm available from, in the mornings before they go on the bus, and then when they get off the bus in the evenings, you're going to have a different law practice. And that's going to impact the type of work that you're probably going to be able to do, how flexible you're going to be able, your time needs to be, the type of clients you do work with, the kind of work that you do in general, practice areas and such, and just how you set up your practice. You know, um, is it just you? Is it you with an associate or with an assistant? Are you looking at VAs, virtual assistants? There are all kinds of different resources that way. But you got to figure out what it is that you need, that's important to you. Again, we go back to that thing about values. What are your values and what's important? And as you are practicing, what are the aspects of practice that you really enjoy the most? What texts do you like to do? If you're just like, I love to argue in court, but I hate drafting briefs and motions. Okay, well, that kind of gives you an idea of maybe what avenue to go. If you really like getting down in the weeds and doing research and finding smoking guns and documents and things like that, but you hate talking with clients. All right, then, like that probably kind of gives you an idea of what you need to focus your practice on. Something where you do that. And maybe that is a kind of a consultant sort of situation where lawyers will hire you to research areas for them or write motions for them, ghostwrite sort of stuff, all kinds of things like that. It's again, it all comes back to this idea of getting to know yourself, figuring out who your values are, and what's going to be most important to you in your life. What is that life that you want to have? What's important to you?
I love that. And I feel like, this is such a hopeful message that you're sharing with our listeners. And it really debunks these myths that a lot of us were kind of like programmed within law school, like here are the paths. And there's a lot of stuff out there that like keeps people trapped. That's like, that's actually not true. You can do what you've done. You can identify your values and the kind of lifestyle you want, what's really important to you. And actually, it may take time and intention, but you can create a law practice that actually fits that. Like we're not often, I wasn't really taught that in law school. So I think that's, a lot of us
No.
don't realize that you can
Yeah,
do
no, we're
that.
not. Law school basically says the path is you graduate and you go into a firm and you
Yeah.
spend 7, 8 years in that firm as an
Yeah.
associate, and then you make partner. And then you
Yeah.
spend the next however many years as a partner. Like that's kind of the path that law school teaches you. Or you go into academia, you become a professor.
Hmm.
Like those are kind of
Yep.
two paths that law schools kind of push. But the reality is something like 70% of lawyers that go into private practice are in sole and small firms. Like they don't
Mm,
go into big firms like that. The number of, I mean, like something like 40% of lawyers end up going are solos. I mean,
interesting.
and those, I mean, I, I may have
Yeah.
just made those numbers up, but it's something like that. Like a good majority of lawyers are solos, but that's not a path that you really are ever told about in law school. Because it's all about you go into the firm, you go, this is the path. You get this gold ring of making partner. That's where we're trying to get. Or again, you go into academia, but there are other things you can do. There are things that aren't that partnership in a law firm track that work better for a lot of lawyers.
I agree, and I have clients and friends who also work in house or work in the government as lawyers. And those can be good paths for people as well. But I know some of us, and you and I may share some of these values, like some of us really value autonomy, independence, and what you were sharing about family. Like, and I think some of those institutions can work for people. They certainly can provide some stability and structure that some people really thrive in. But some of us are maybe willing to trade some of those things to have to really do the work we enjoy, to have more freedom over our schedule and the kind of clients we work with. So the solo path seems like it can be really good for some people. Yeah, I was just reminded of a woman lawyer I met at a happy hour, like a lawyer networking event that I co-hosted last year, and she's a solo firm owner. She's just a solo practitioner, and she was going off the grid to like go backpacking for 3 days, and no phone, nothing. And she's single, she doesn't have children or anything. And I just thought, how cool. And she loves her practice. She's a genuinely happy lawyer. And then she gets, she knows what's important to her, which she likes to disconnect from, technology and go into the wilderness. And I think that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, just showing our audience like there are many ways to, create a career that is meaningful and aligns with your values in your life.
Mhm. And even if you make a choice early on that's maybe doesn't align, or again, like so things change throughout. Like when I started
Yes.
practice, I'm a totally different person than I am now. Like we
Mm,
lived in the city, and I enjoyed the excitement and things, and all the stuff like that. And now I'm like, I live basically I'm pretty much in the woods. Like
yeah.
I live an hour away from the city. Like very quiet and peaceful, and I look outside and I see trees. Like that is it's a different kind of season of life right now for me. And the choices that I made then, if they don't work for me now, you make a new change, a new choice. You know, um,
Yeah.
it's you're not stuck. Even though you may think you are not stuck in a decision that you've made. You'd always make a new choice and go a different direction if it feels more aligned with you.
Yes, I love that. I love that message so much. And another thing we have in common is I started practicing law in DC, and we lived in DC, and I loved the city, and we went out to eat and to concerts and events all the time. And then things shifted. We had our kids, and that my values started shifting a little bit, like wanting more green spaces. I wasn't going into the city as much, doing a lot of those activities. And then now my entire nervous system, like I value the quiet so much. So where I live is really quiet, really peaceful. I see the mountains, I see the all kinds of vegetation and plant life around me. I'm in the desert, so not as many trees, the
Less
cactus.
trees.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's beautiful in its own way. But yeah, it has shifted for me. I loved living in the city when I was younger, but now I really do value like the quiet and being further away from some of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, um, Brad, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I think it's so hopeful. And really, the theme I sense is just being intentional, getting to know yourself, getting to know your values, giving yourself permission to evolve and change and to make new choices. You know, we're not
Right.
stuck with choices we made 20 years ago, 5 years ago. And I'm curious for our listeners who would like to connect with you, learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
So my law practice is bradleymillerlaw.com. If you're in Ohio looking to buy a business or a franchise or something like that, but otherwise, I do a lot of writing on LinkedIn, and I also have kind of a Substack on kind of concurrently that I've started up, trying to write some things out there. And who knows by the time this thing goes live what other things I may be doing at this point. But like you talked about, New Modern Lawyer is kind of the brand. So if you do some searches, you can probably find me out there through there.
Great. Thank you. And I can put links to that in the show notes to where people can find you. And I want to thank you, Brad, so much for having this conversation. And thanks to our listeners for spending this time with us. So, this is Returning to Soul. We are so glad you're here. And until next time, be well.